Dr. Linkletter is supposed to be the obstacle, the pompous, self-important professor standing between a 9-year-old genius and the academic career he deserves. That's the role. Except when you actually sit with his story, a tragic truth comes up. Because the man who spends most of the young Sheldon show being annoyed, undermined, and professionally embarrassed by a child he is legally required to teach, that man is one of the loneliest characters in the entire series. And the show never says it out loud. It just shows you over and over if you're paying attention. Let's start with the obvious thing that everybody misreads. Linkletter is not stupid. He is not a bad physicist. He is not, despite what the framing sometimes implies, actually inferior to John Sturgis. He's a working academic in a mid-tier Texas university in the 1980s, which means he has spent his entire professional life being exactly as smart as the room he's in, right up until a 9-year-old walks through his door and rewires every dynamic he thought he understood. That's not a joke about his limitations. That's a genuinely humiliating professional experience that nobody in Medford seems to think deserves any sympathy whatsoever. Think about what his daily life looks like before Sheldon. He is the most intellectually accomplished person in his orbit. His colleagues respect him. His students defer to him. He has an identity built entirely around being the smartest man in the building. And then Sheldon Cooper enrolls in his class, and he never gets that building back. Here's what people get wrong about his reaction to Sheldon. They read it as wounded ego. Small man, big brain, threatened by a child. And sure, some of that is true, the show earns the joke. But underneath the exasperation, something more complicated is happening. Linkletter keeps engaging. That's the thing. A man who just wanted Sheldon gone would have failed him, ignored him, handed him off to someone else. Professors have tools for students they don't want to deal with. He never uses them. He argues back. He pushes. He shows up to the intellectual fight every single time. And for a man whose entire identity is his mind, that's not resentment. That's the only real conversation he's having. He doesn't know that. He would never frame it that way. But watch the scenes where Sheldon challenges him on something genuinely difficult, a real physics problem, a genuine theoretical disagreement. And Linkletter is more present in those moments than anywhere else in the series. His eyes are different. The performance drops. He's not playing professor anymore, he's actually thinking. A 9-year-old child is the only person in Medford, Texas, who forces Randall Linkletter to be fully in the room. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because if that's true, then Linkletter's life outside those moments is what exactly? He has no family mentioned in the series. No wife, no kids, no history of either. He has colleagues, a rivalry with Sturgis that functions as the closest thing he has to a friendship, and a university office that is basically his entire world. He is, in the language the show uses for Pastor Jeff, a function. His identity is the role. Professor Linkletter exists. Randall barely does. And this is where the Connie storyline becomes something a lot heavier than a comedy subplot. When Linkletter starts spending time with Connie, the audience is primed to read it as absurd. Meemaw and the professor, the wild grandmother and the buttoned-up academic. The laugh track knows what to do with it. But if you actually watch what Linkletter does in those scenes, he's not performing. He's attempting. He brings genuine curiosity to her. He asks questions. He listens in a way that suggests he doesn't do that very often. And Connie, to her credit, sees something real in him too. Even if she can't quite get past the stiffness, the self-importance, the way he talks about himself like he's presenting a paper at a conference. That relationship ends not because they stop liking each other, but because Linkletter cannot turn off the role long enough to just be a person with her. Every romantic gesture is slightly too formal. Every vulnerable moment gets intellectualized before it can breathe. He knows. somewhere under all of it, that he's doing it wrong. You can see it. But he's been Professor Linkletter for so long that he genuinely doesn't have access to whatever was underneath it. The rivalry with Sturgis is the thing that really crystallizes all of this, because on the surface, it's academic competition. Two physicists, one department, overlapping research interests, a woman they both have feelings for. Standard stuff. But watch what happens when you strip the academic posturing away. These are two men in their 50s who have spent their careers becoming incredibly impressive and ending up profoundly alone. Sturgis is more openly emotional about it. His struggles are more visible on screen, the social difficulties, the way he moves through the world at an angle to everyone around him. Linkletter hides his version better, but it's the same thing. They are each other's most consistent company. The rivalry is, functionally, the most intimate relationship either of them has. They compete because competing is how they connect. They argue because arguing is intimacy for men who never learned another way. And the reason it hurts to watch, if you're paying attention, is that both of them know it and neither of them says it. Two people who are lonely together, spending that loneliness on each other, calling it competition because that's a word they can live with. Here's the part nobody talks about. Linkletter actually changes because of Sheldon. Not dramatically, not in a way the show hands you wrapped and labeled, but across the series, his relationship to his own discomfort shifts. He starts out trying to make Sheldon someone else's problem. He ends up slowly, reluctantly, treating him like a student he's responsible for. He complains about it constantly. He never stops complaining about it. But the complaints become something different over time. They stop being about wanting Sheldon gone. They start sounding more like the way someone talks about a person who frustrates them because they actually care how it goes. There's a quiet irony in all of it that the show never underlines. Linkletter, who built his life around intellectual achievement, who made academia the whole thing, who sacrificed whatever personal softness he had on the altar of professional seriousness, ends up defined by his relationship to a 9-year-old he never asked for. Sheldon is the thing people will remember Linkletter for, not his research, not his career, not whatever he accomplished in that office where he spent most of his life. The pompous professor who couldn't handle a child genius. That's the legacy. Except that's not actually the story either, because the real story is a man who was given completely against his will. The one thing his constructed life couldn't provide. Someone who took him seriously enough to argue back. Someone who didn't care about the title or the office or the decades of published work. Someone who just showed up with a genuinely hard problem and expected a real answer. Sheldon never understood what he gave Linkletter. He wouldn't have the framework for it. And Linkletter would never in a million years have said it out loud. But somewhere in the accumulated weight of all those arguments, all those lectures, all those professional indignities, Linkletter was more alive than he'd been in years. A man who poured everything into becoming the smartest person in the room. And it took a child to show him that being the smartest person in the room was never going to be enough. That's not a punchline. That's a life.